The stars twinkled like cold diamonds against the endless black void of space. Inside a sleek, high-tech spacecraft, the alien Princess Zura sat in a command chair, her sharp eyes scanning the data on the control panel. Her every movement was controlled, deliberate, but a storm was brewing inside her. Zura, once a proud princess of the Zorthian Empire, was now a prisoner of her own rebellion. The Zorthian Empire had rules, strict, unyielding laws that dictated the lives of its citizens. Zira, a strong-willed and intelligent woman, had once admired those rules, seeing them as the foundation of order. But as the years passed, she grew restless, questioning the Empire's methods and motives. She was no longer content to blindly follow orders. She wanted more power, more freedom, more influence. Her rebellion was swift and calculated, but ultimately it was a failure. She had underestimated the might of the Empire. As punishment for her actions, Zira was sentenced to a fate worse than death, banishment to Earth. The planet, considered primitive and insignificant by her people, was thought to be an ideal place for a disgraced royal to be forgotten. The Empire's leaders believed that stripping Zira of her status and powers would break her spirit. The spaceship accelerated, hurtling through space toward its destination. Zira felt a familiar, unnerving jolt as the ship's engines roared, the stars outside becoming mere streaks of light. Yet, despite the grandeur of the technology around her, she could not ignore the cold emptiness within. This punishment, this exile, was unbearable. She clenched her fists, staring out into the infinite space. Earth, a barren, backward world. Nothing like the advanced civilizations she had known. But as she brooded in her isolation, disaster struck. A sharp, explosive sound shattered the quiet hum of the ship. The control panel blinked wildly as alarms blared. The lights flickered. Something had gone wrong. Terribly wrong. The emergency systems kicked in, but it was too late. Zira's heart raced as she grabbed hold of the armrests, bracing for impact. The ship was spiraling, caught in the pull of an unknown force, the atmosphere of Earth too close now to avoid. Before she could react, the ship's hull was torn apart by a sudden jolt, sending her flying from her seat. The control room exploded in chaos, flames licking at the walls. Zira's breath caught in her throat as she felt the ship fall like a stone, plummeting toward Earth's surface. She fought to maintain control, but the ship was beyond repair, her escape attempt failing miserably. All she could do now was pray that the crash would be swift. With a final violent shudder, the ship slammed into the ground. The world spun violently before everything went black. Zira slowly regained consciousness, her body aching from the impact. She groggily opened her eyes, the bright light of Earth's sun blinding her momentarily. Her surroundings were nothing like the sleek, metallic corridors of the Zorthian fleet. Instead, she was surrounded by towering trees, dense vegetation, and the soft hum of insects in the air. It was as if she had landed on another world entirely. She tried to sit up, but her limbs felt heavy and uncooperative. Her head throbbed as if someone had struck her with a mallet. As she groaned in discomfort, she looked down at herself and found her once pristine uniform dirtied and torn. Her equipment, once capable of interfacing with any technology, was now rendered useless. Her powers, which had once allowed her to manipulate energy and control advanced devices, were gone. She felt human. She cursed under her breath. Earth, of all places, she had been exiled to a backward, primitive world, and now, stranded without the very powers that had once made her invincible, this place was nothing like the mighty cities of the Zorthian Empire. There were no shimmering towers, no fleets of warships, no holographic systems. The planet was wild, untamed. She had no control here. The thought of it filled her with a deep, simmering rage. Her first instinct was to return to the ship, to find her equipment, but she quickly realized it was futile. The wreckage of the ship lay scattered in the distance, half buried in the dense forest. As Zira tried to stand, her legs wobbled beneath her, and she felt a wave of weakness. She had never experienced this before. Her body was failing her, her advanced physiology not adapted to Earth's atmosphere. The alien air seemed to choke her with every breath. "This is humiliating," she muttered, gritting her teeth. How had she gone from ruling an empire to being a powerless prisoner on a primitive world? Suddenly, she heard movement behind her. She spun around, her instincts kicking in, but she saw no immediate threat. Just then, a figure emerged from the thick trees. A human. Zyra's eyes narrowed as she observed him. He was tall, with a rugged, battle-worn appearance, and a confident air that caught her attention. His clothes were simple, but his eyes were sharp, scanning her as though he had seen 1,000 battles. Zyra tensed, ready to defend herself, but the human didn't make a move. Instead, he watched her with curiosity, his hand hovering near the weapon on his side, though he made no effort to draw it. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you want, human?" she asked, her voice cold and imperious. The human tilted his head slightly, sizing her up. There was a strange mix of wariness and interest in his gaze. "I could ask you the same question," he replied, his voice low and gravelly. "You don't look like you belong here." Zyra's pride flared at his words. She was no mere wanderer. She was a princess, a royal of the Zorthian Empire. Yet here she was, stranded in a hostile world with no way to get home. She narrowed her eyes. "I am not your concern. Leave now." But something in his eyes told her that he wasn't afraid. He wasn't intimidated by her beauty, her alien power, or her harsh words. There was no fear, only curiosity. And that, more than anything else, disturbed Zyra. She was used to being admired, feared, and respected. Humans, however, seemed to look at her with nothing more than interest. There was no awe, no worship. She hated it. The human took a step forward, still not drawing his weapon. "I'm Alex," he said simply. "And you're in the middle of nowhere. You need help." Zyra felt a flash of annoyance. "I don't need your help," she snapped. But as she said the words, something in her stomach twisted. The reality of her situation was sinking in. She was powerless, stranded on this primitive planet, with no way to communicate with her empire or even contact anyone for help. Alex, however, seemed undeterred by her harsh words. "If you change your mind, I'll be around," he said, turning away and disappearing back into the forest. Zyra stood there for a long moment, her fists clenched by her sides. She hated this place. She hated feeling so weak, so helpless. The very air seemed to mock her, the trees towering over her like giants. She had never been so alone. But as the hours passed, she began to realize something that unsettled her even more. She wasn't just angry. She was afraid. Afraid of being stranded here forever. Afraid of being forgotten. Earth had been designed as a punishment, but the more Zyra thought about it, the more she wondered if she had been sent here to be broken, not just by the physical landscape, but by the very humans she had dismissed as weak. And then there was Alex, his calm confidence, his lack of fear. It both intrigued and irritated her. There was something about him that made her think she had misjudged this planet entirely. Something deep within her told her that this journey would not be as simple as she had thought. As night fell and the stars emerged, Zyra found herself looking up at the vast expanse of space above her. The world felt so small, so insignificant, but she knew that this was only the beginning. The question was no longer just how to escape Earth. The question was what Earth would do to her in return, and what she would do to survive. Zyra slowly sat up, her muscles aching from the long hours of lying motionless in the forest. Her head was pounding, and the world around her felt like a strange alien place. The wild, unkempt beauty of Earth only seemed to emphasize how out of place she was. The faint rustling of leaves and the calls of unknown creatures echoed in the distance, but she was too focused on the aching emptiness inside her to pay much attention. Her body felt weak, fragile even. The environment around her was hostile in ways she couldn't have predicted, and the harshness of the planet made her feel smaller than ever. She glanced at the wreckage of her ship, now just a twisted heap of metal. It was a reminder of her failure, a failed escape attempt. Zira knew it would take months, if not years, for her to repair the ship, if she could at all. There was no other option but to survive. Her eyes narrowed as a sudden movement caught her attention. From the dense trees, a massive creature emerged, its long, muscular body moving swiftly through the underbrush. Zira's first instinct was to stand, to prepare herself, but she was still groggy, her limbs not responding the way she wanted. She staggered to her feet just as the creature, a hulking, snarling beast with claws sharp as knives, lunged toward her. For a split second, panic surged within her. She had been trained to fight and defend herself, but this wasn't like any battle she had ever faced. She reached for the weapons on her belt, only to find them gone. They were probably lost in the wreckage of the ship, leaving her completely unarmed. The beast's massive jaws snapped, closing just inches from her face. Zira barely managed to dodge its attack, rolling away and scrambling to her feet. Her heart raced. She had no way to defend herself, no technology to protect her. This was raw, primal fear, something she hadn't felt in ages. But just as the creature moved to strike again, a sharp, controlled shot rang through the air, striking the beast squarely in the side. The creature let out a howl of pain, retreating into the underbrush as a figure appeared from the trees. It was Alex, the human who had seen her before. He was now fully armed, his weapon slung over his shoulder. He approached with calm precision, his eyes never leaving the place where the creature had disappeared. Zira was still stunned, her heart still racing, as Alex turned toward her, his face serious but not unkind. "You okay?" he asked simply, his voice calm but with an edge of concern. Zira, still catching her breath, nodded, though her pride flared. "I don't need your help," she snapped, but the words came out weak. She had no choice but to admit that for the first time since her exile, she had been saved by this human. He had acted quickly, without hesitation, and his aim had been precise. She had underestimated him, just like she had underestimated Earth. Alex didn't reply right away. He simply nodded, turning his attention to the creature's tracks, scanning the area for any more signs of danger. Zira stood there, her mind racing. She was still shaken by the encounter, but she couldn't let this human see that. She was a princess, an alien warrior, and no matter how primitive Earth was, she would not let herself be brought low. "You should learn to defend yourself," Alex said, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "I can teach you." Zira raised an eyebrow. "Teach me," she said, her tone dripping with disbelief. "I don't need your human survival skills." Alex chuckled, the sound deep and reassuring. "You might think you don't, but out here, you'll need them. Even someone like you can't survive on strength and pride alone." Zira's fists clenched. Her pride had been wounded, but part of her realized that Alex was right. She had no weapons, no ship, no technology, nothing but her own strength and wit. The realization settled in like a stone in her stomach, and she hated it. "Fine," she said stiffly. "Teach me." Over the next few days, Zira grudgingly allowed Alex to teach her the basics of survival in this strange world. He showed her how to make a fire using simple tools, something that had seemed trivial to her at first. But as she worked with the materials, it became clear that this human had an understanding of nature she had never encountered. He wasn't relying on advanced technology, gadgets, or weapons. He was relying on his senses, his knowledge of the environment, and his resourcefulness. It was a humbling experience. At first, Zira couldn't understand why Alex would bother with such simple things, but as they sat around the fire one night, the warm glow flickering in the darkness, something inside her shifted. She had been so focused on her pride, on her superiority, that she had forgotten how to truly survive in the most basic sense. Alex's lessons were practical: how to track animals, how to avoid dangerous plants, how to read the stars to navigate. Despite her initial resistance, Zyra began to see the value in what he was teaching her. She had always relied on her intelligence and her technology to get by, but Alex was showing her something else: the resilience of human ingenuity. Their days together became more than just lessons. Zyra found herself growing more and more intrigued by Alex, not just his survival skills, but his character. He was fearless, but not reckless. He was strong, but not overbearing. He didn't ask for anything in return. He simply helped without any expectation. She began to see him in a new light. The human who had once seemed like nothing more than a primitive, weak creature was slowly becoming someone she could rely on. It wasn't just his skill that impressed her, it was his determination. In a way, he embodied everything she had once admired in the Zorthian Empire: resilience, strength, and honor. But instead of using those qualities for conquest, Alex used them to survive, to protect. The two of them spent hours working together, their bond strengthening with each passing day. Zyra, the once proud princess, was starting to let down her guard. Alex's quiet confidence had an effect on her that she hadn't anticipated. For the first time since her exile, she felt something other than rage and bitterness. She felt something more. But even as she grew closer to Alex, she couldn't shake the feeling that Earth was testing her. It was as if the planet itself was forcing her to confront her own limitations, her pride, her identity. And she hated it. But she had no choice but to adapt, to survive, to learn. And with Alex by her side, she might just be able to do that. One night, as they sat beside a crackling fire, Zyra glanced up at the stars. She had always loved the stars, how they stretched on for eternity, how they held the answers to so many questions. But now, they felt different. Earth's stars were smaller, closer, more familiar. There was something comforting about them, something that made her feel not so alone. "I never thought I'd end up here," Zyra said softly, her gaze fixed on the sky. "Exiled to a primitive world. I thought I'd die in glory. Not here." Alex didn't answer right away. He just stared at the fire, the flickering flames casting shadows on his face. "Sometimes life doesn't turn out the way we expect," he said quietly. "But that doesn't mean we can't make something of it." Zyra turned toward him, her heart beating faster for reasons she couldn't explain. She had been so focused on the idea of returning to her empire, reclaiming her status, that she hadn't allowed herself to see the possibilities of Earth. Maybe this world, this exile, wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning. And with Alex by her side, she began to wonder if she might just find her purpose here after all. Zyra's days on Earth had slowly begun to take on a rhythm. She had grown accustomed to Alex's lessons, to the raw, untamed beauty of the planet. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. The harshness of Earth, the constant struggle for survival, had changed her. Each day was a lesson in resilience, in how small, seemingly insignificant things, like the warmth of a fire or the simplicity of a quiet moment, could become something more. And as she spent more time with Alex, she found herself growing closer to him, her feelings for him deeper than she ever thought possible. But just as she began to embrace her new life, a dark shadow loomed over her. It came without warning. The sky above, once clear and bright, was suddenly torn apart by a distant rumble. A strange, unfamiliar sound echoed through the forest. It wasn't thunder. It was something much worse. Zyra's heart skipped a beat. She knew that sound. She had heard it many times before in the halls of the Zorthian Empire, in the wars that had plagued her people for centuries. It was the unmistakable hum of a warship entering the atmosphere. Zyra froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her gaze shot up to the sky, and that's when she saw it. A massive ship, darker than the night itself, cutting through the clouds. It was like nothing she had ever seen before, yet it felt all too familiar. The markings on the hull, the sleek, menacing shape. It was a Galactic Council warship, the kind that only her people would send. "Zyra." Alex's voice cut through her shock, snapping her back to reality. He was already moving, pulling her by the arm. "We need to move. Now." But Zyra didn't move. She couldn't. Her mind was racing. They had come for her. The Galactic Council had come to take her back, to punish her for her rebellion. Earth, this beautiful, strange world that she had begun to call home, was nothing more than a temporary refuge. And just like that, her heart ached with the weight of it all. She wasn't ready to leave, but there was no time to think. As the warship hovered above the clouds, a deep, powerful voice came from the ship's loudspeakers, booming down to the planet below. "Zyra of the Zorthian Empire, you are hereby summoned to return to the Galactic Council. You have been found guilty of treason and will be brought to justice." Zyra's stomach twisted. Her people had no mercy. The Council would not hesitate to destroy Earth if it meant capturing her. She knew that all too well. Before she could react, the ship began its assault. Giant beams of blue energy shot down from the warship, cutting through the atmosphere with a deafening roar. The beams sliced the sky, their blinding light searing through the clouds, obliterating everything in their path. The landscape below began to crumble as the lasers hit the ground, leaving behind craters and burning wreckage. Alex tugged at her again, urgency in his movements. "Zyra, we have to move." Zyra's instincts kicked in. She grabbed his hand, her heart pounding, and together they sprinted into the dense forest, the sound of the bombardment still ringing in her ears. Trees splintered and fell around them as the warship continued its attack from above. The ground shook with each strike, and debris rained down around them. They had to escape, but the warship's advanced weaponry made it impossible to stay in the open for long. "Alex," Zyra shouted, her voice hoarse with panic. "We can't outrun them. They'll destroy everything. We have to try." Alex called back, his grip tight on her hand. "There has to be a way." As they ran through the forest, Zyra's mind was racing. She could feel the pull of her past, the duty to her people, but the warmth of Earth, of Alex's presence, was pulling her in the opposite direction. Her heart was torn. Could she really return to the Galactic Council? Could she leave Alex behind? Could she abandon this new life she had begun to build? The warship continued to rain destruction down from above, but Zyra knew she couldn't go back to the Council. She was no longer that person. She wasn't the proud princess who had fought for power and status. She wasn't the cold ruler who had ignored the struggles of those she ruled over. Earth had changed her, and now it was impossible to go back. But her people wouldn't give her a choice. They were coming for her, and they would stop at nothing to bring her back. As they pushed deeper into the forest, the sounds of the warship's bombardment became distant, but the fear in Zyra's chest remained. It wasn't just fear for herself anymore. It was fear for Alex, for Earth, for everything she had come to care about. The Galactic Council would not hesitate to destroy this planet to capture her. It was the way of their empire, efficient, cold, and ruthless. Finally, they reached a small clearing, hidden from the destruction above. The sky was now filled with thick smoke, the air heavy with the scent of burning earth. Zyra and Alex collapsed to the ground, breathless from the sprint. Zyra's thoughts were chaotic. The attack had only just begun, and she had no way of stopping it. Her people were here, and they wouldn't leave without her. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. "I can't go back," Zyra whispered, her voice shaky. "I won't let them destroy Earth. I won't let them take me back." Alex looked at her, his face soft with understanding. "You don't have to go back. You don't have to do this alone." But Zyra shook her head, her gaze hardening with resolve. "I am alone. This is the price I must pay for my rebellion. But I won't let Earth suffer because of me." She stood up, her eyes scanning the sky for any sign of the warship's next move. In that moment, she understood what she had to do. She had to stop them, stop her own people, from destroying everything she had come to love. She had no ship, no advanced weapons, but she still had her strength, her knowledge, and her heart. "I won't let them take me," Zyra said, her voice firm. "I won't let them take anything from this planet." Alex stood beside her, ready to fight at her side. She could see the determination in his eyes, and for the first time, she knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together. The fire crackled softly in the cool night air, its warmth a small comfort against the vast, cold darkness of the forest. Alex and Zyra sat together by the fire, their bodies close but their minds lost in their own thoughts. The stars above twinkled, a silent witness to the turmoil and uncertainty that gripped them both. They had escaped the initial bombardment, but they knew it wouldn't last. The Galactic Council wouldn't stop until they had Zyra back. Alex glanced at Zyra, watching the way the firelight danced in her eyes, casting shadows across her stunning face. He had seen so much of her strength and pride, but in this moment, she seemed vulnerable. There was a quiet sadness in her gaze that tugged at his heart. Despite everything they had been through, despite the chaos and the dangers they faced, Alex had come to realize something. He had fallen for her. He took a deep breath, his voice low as he spoke, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "Zyra, I know you're not human. You've got powers I can't even begin to understand, and your people are, well, they're not like us." He paused, searching for the right words. "But none of that matters to me. I've fallen for you, and I'd do anything to protect you." Zyra turned to him, her heart racing. His words cut through her like a blade, sharp and unexpected. She had never allowed herself to feel something like this before, especially not for a human. Her entire life had been one of duty, power, and control, but with Alex, everything was different. Her throat tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. The emotions inside her were too raw, too overwhelming. But then she found her voice, softer and more fragile than she had ever allowed it to be. "Alex," she began, her words barely above a whisper, "I've never felt anything like this before. The way you make me feel, it's real. I've never known love like this, not until now." Her confession hung in the air, a fragile, precious thing between them. In that moment, the weight of their shared experiences, their struggles, and their growing bond seemed to make everything else fade into the background. There was no worship overhead, no elite warriors coming for them, just the two of them, sitting together under a sky full of stars. But that peaceful moment didn't last. The distant sound of engines shattered the silence, the low hum of alien technology growing louder by the second. Zyra's heart skipped a beat as she looked up, her eyes narrowing with recognition. "They've sent them," she muttered under her breath. "The elite warriors of the Galactic Council. We don't have much time." Alex's face hardened. He didn't need to ask who they were. He could see the fear in Zyra's eyes, and that was enough. These warriors were coming for them, and they wouldn't stop until Zyra was back under the control of the Galactic Council. There would be no mercy. With no time to lose, they stood up and quickly began to prepare, gathering what little they had and making sure they were ready for the fight ahead. Zyra could feel the presence of the warriors drawing closer, their advanced technology and strength only adding to the weight of the situation. But she wasn't afraid, not anymore. She had Alex by her side, and together, they had already overcome so much. The sound of footsteps broke through the stillness of the night, sharp and fast. The elite warriors appeared, moving like shadows through the trees. Their weapons were sleek and deadly, their movements precise. They came in a circle, closing in on Alex and Zyra from every direction. Zyra stood tall, her eyes glowing with power. She could feel the energy building inside her, the alien abilities that had once been her greatest strength now at her fingertips. But this time, there was something different. She wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for Alex, for the life they had just begun to build together. The love she felt for him burned brightly, fueling her every move. Alex, though unarmed and outmatched, stood next to her, his eyes burning with determination. He had seen the destruction these warriors could cause, but he wasn't going to let them take Zyra. not without a fight. The first warrior lunged, his weapon crackling with deadly energy. Alex dodged, using his human instincts to avoid the strike. But it was clear that the warriors were far stronger, far more skilled than anything he had faced before. He fought back with everything he had, using every trick he'd learned over the years. But the odds were against him. Zira reacted quickly, her energy manipulation abilities flaring as she released a blast of raw power that sent one of the warriors flying back. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched Alex fight, his every move determined and brave. But it wasn't enough. The warriors were closing in, and despite their best efforts, they were being overwhelmed. And then, in the midst of the chaos, it happened. Alex, trying to protect Zira, took a heavy blow to his side. The force of the attack sent him crashing to the ground, gasping for breath. Blood stained his shirt, and his face contorted in pain. Zira's heart dropped as she rushed to his side, fear and anger mixing in a torrent of emotion. "Alex," she cried, her voice trembling. Her hands shook as she tried to assess his wounds, but the panic rising in her chest made it hard to focus. He was hurt, badly hurt. She had to protect him, had to keep him alive. Tears welled up in her eyes as she watched him struggle to stay conscious. She couldn't lose him. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. The thought of life without him was unbearable. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. Zira felt the surge of power, the fire of her love for Alex, fueling her every movement. She no longer cared about the consequences. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the one person who had shown her what love truly was. With a roar of determination, Zira unleashed the full extent of her power. The air around her crackled with energy as she lashed out at the warriors, her abilities tearing through the forest like a storm. The ground trembled beneath her feet as she unleashed everything she had. The warriors fell one by one, their once imposing figures crumpling under the force of her rage and love. In the end, the battlefield was silent, save for the soft crackle of the fire and the ragged breaths of Zira and Alex. The warriors lay defeated around them, but the cost had been high. Zira collapsed next to Alex, her energy drained, but her heart swelling with pride. She had protected him. She had saved him. And in that moment, Zira knew that no matter what happened, she would never let go of this love. It had become her greatest strength, her greatest weapon. And she would fight for it with everything she had. The air was thick with tension as the final battle loomed on the horizon. The stakes had never been higher. Alex, lying unconscious and gravely injured, was barely hanging on. Zira's heart raced as she looked at him, the man who had shown her the warmth of human love. She had never known such feelings before, feelings that had shattered her once proud alien heart and made her realize that her life was no longer about duty or power. It was about love, about the man lying before her. But now, that love was in jeopardy. The Galactic Council, in their relentless pursuit of capturing Zira, had launched their final assault. Their most formidable weapon, an eye-controlled warship, hovered above the Earth, a terrifying presence in the sky. This weapon, a behemoth of metal and advanced technology, was capable of wiping out entire cities with a single blast. Its cloaking device made it almost invisible to the naked eye, an advantage that made it even more dangerous. Zira's thoughts were a whirlwind. She knew that she had to act fast. The Galactic Council had given her an ultimatum: return to the Zorthian Empire and face their judgment as a disgraced princess, or stay on Earth with Alex and face the consequences of defying her people. The choice was clear: stay with Alex, the one person who had taught her the meaning of love. But that meant fighting not only for their survival, but for Earth's survival as well. With Alex unable to fight, the weight of the world rested on Zira's shoulders. She could feel the power within her, the raw energy of her alien ability surging through her veins. But she knew that in order to defeat the warship, she would need more than just her strength. She would need to outsmart it. The warship was controlled by an advanced AI, and Zira understood the workings of alien technology better than anyone. She just needed to disable its cloaking device before it could unleash its full fury. The sky above began to darken as the warship descended, its massive form casting a shadow over the land. The ground shook with every movement it made, the air humming with the sound of its engines. Zira stood tall, her eyes burning with determination. This was it, the final battle. With a deep breath, Zira reached out with her mind, her energy flowing outward as she focused on the warship. The cloaking device was powerful, but Zira's abilities were greater. She could feel the device's energy field, a complex web of electromagnetic pulses. She closed her eyes, concentrating harder, and with a sharp mental command, she cracked the code, disrupting the cloaking device. The warship, now fully visible, was a terrifying sight. Its sleek, metallic surface gleamed under the dim light, and its weapon systems powered up, ready to destroy everything in its path. Zira's heart pounded in her chest, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. The AI inside the warship was cold and calculating, devoid of emotion. But Zira had something it didn't: humanity. And she was willing to use that advantage to protect the one she loved. Zira summoned every ounce of her power, her hands glowing with energy, as she sent a surge of force toward the warship. The blast hit its shield, creating a shockwave that sent ripples through the air. But the warship's defenses were strong. It retaliated, firing a barrage of lasers from its cannons. Zira dodged, using her cloaking abilities to disappear into the shadows, but she knew that this would only be a temporary solution. From the ground, Alex's voice broke through the chaos. Weak but determined, he called out to her. "Zira, don't give up. You can do this. I'm with you." His words were a lifeline, a reminder of the love that had brought them together and the strength they had found in each other. His unwavering support gave Zira the courage to push forward. With a fierce roar, Zira reappeared, her energy surging as she charged at the warship. The eye-controlled vessel retaliated with another deadly blast, but Zira was ready. She deflected the laser with a barrier of energy, her hands glowing brightly as she focused on her target. The warship's main weapon systems were vulnerable, and she knew that a direct hit could disable it. With a final, powerful push, Zira unleashed all of her energy in one concentrated strike. The explosion was deafening, a massive burst of light and sound that rocked the very ground beneath them. For a moment, everything went silent, the smoke and debris clouding. When the dust settled, the warship was no more. The AI had been destroyed, its systems completely fried by Zira's attack. The Galactic Council's final weapon had been taken out, but at what cost? Zira dropped to her knees, exhausted but victorious. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her body ached from the strain of using so much power. But she had done it. She had saved Earth, and she had saved the man she loved. Alex, still lying on the ground, managed to sit up, a weak smile crossing his face. "You did it," he whispered, his voice hoarse but filled with admiration. "You saved us." Zira looked at him, her heart swelling with love. She had done it for him, for them. And in that moment, she realized something important. She didn't need to go back to the Zorthian Empire. She didn't need to follow the orders of the Galactic Council anymore. She had found something on Earth that was far more valuable: love, freedom, and a future with Alex. As the Galactic Council's forces retreated, acknowledging Earth's strength, Zira made her choice. She would stay. She would stay with Alex, the man who had taught her what it meant to truly live. Together, they would build a life on Earth, one free from the constraints of her past, one filled with love, adventure, and hope. And so, as the final battle came to an end, Zira and Alex stood together, their hands intertwined, ready to face whatever the future held. The world around them was uncertain, but they had each other, and that was all they needed to conquer whatever came next. Dira stood at the edge of the forest, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The sky above her was clear, a soft gradient of oranges and purples as the sun began to set. The world felt different now, the air filled with a sense of peace and possibility. For so long, she had been a prisoner of her past, an alien princess bound by the expectations of her people, a warrior trained to fight and conquer. But now, everything had changed. Now she was free. The decision to remain on Earth hadn't been easy. The Zorthian Empire, with all its power and control, had promised her a life of luxury and status. She had been expected to return to her home, to embrace her royal duties, and to put aside her newfound feelings for a human who was nothing more than a fleeting distraction. But Zira had realized something in the moments after the battle with the warship. Her heart didn't belong to the Zorthian Empire. It belonged to Earth, and it belonged to Alex. Alex, the man who had shown her what it meant to truly live. Alex, who had taught her about love, about humanity, and about the strength that comes from standing together. They had fought side by side, and now they would build their future together, far away from the oppressive rules of her past. She turned and looked at him, standing a few feet away, his presence as comforting as ever. Alex had always been her anchor, the one constant in the chaos of her life. He had stood by her when no one else would, and now he was all she needed. Together, they were creating a new life, one that didn't require her to be a princess or a warrior. It simply required her to be herself. They had decided to settle in a quiet part of Earth, away from the prying eyes of the Galactic Council and anyone who might recognize her as a fallen princess. Here, Zira could learn more about Earth, about its people and its culture. She could explore the beauty of a world she had once considered insignificant. She had already begun to see Earth's charm in a new light, appreciating the small, everyday moments that she had never known before. The way the trees swayed in the wind, the laughter of children in the distance, the taste of fresh food, and the warmth of the sun on her skin. Earth was full of wonders she had never imagined. Zira was slowly adapting to her new life. She had started learning about human customs, immersing herself in the everyday activities that made life on Earth so unique. She and Alex had spent countless hours walking through the forest, talking about their hopes and dreams, sharing stories of their pasts. Zira was amazed by how much she could learn from Alex, who was so different from her yet so similar in many ways. He was patient with her, helping her navigate the complexities of Earth's simple pleasures. He taught her how to cook, how to build a fire, how to appreciate the little moments that made life so rich. They had created a routine together, one that centered around the love they shared. In the mornings, they would walk through the fields near their home, talking about everything and nothing at all. They would spend the afternoons exploring the surrounding forests, with Alex showing her the ways of Earth's wilds. In the evenings, they would sit beneath the stars, holding hands, talking about their future. Zira had never felt so at peace, so content, and so loved. One evening, as they sat outside, watching the stars twinkle above them, Zira couldn't help but reflect on her journey. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had crashed on Earth, a lost princess with nowhere to go. She had been so certain that she was meant for greatness, destined to rule the Zorthian Empire. But in the end, she had realized that greatness didn't come from power or titles. It came from love, from finding purpose in the simple things, and from being true to oneself. She thought back to the moment when she had made her choice, to stay on Earth with Alex. It had been a moment of clarity, a realization that her past, her royal heritage, didn't define her. What mattered was the life she was building now, the future she and Alex were creating together. She had left behind her title, her position, and everything that had once seemed so important. And in return, she had gained something far more valuable, a love that transcended the boundaries of her alien race, a future that was hers to shape, and the chance to experience life as it was meant to be lived. As she gazed up at the stars, Zira felt a sense of gratitude wash over her. She had come a long way from the alien princess who had once looked down on Earth and its inhabitants. Now she saw Earth as a place of hope and potential, a world that had given her everything she never knew she needed. And in Alex, she had found a partner who accepted her for who she was, flaws and all. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night, as if in approval of the new life she had chosen. She leaned her head on Alex's shoulder, feeling his warmth beside her. They were no longer enemies, no longer strangers from different worlds. They were partners, equals, bound by love and a shared vision of the future. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds?" Zyra asked softly, her voice filled with wonder. Alex smiled, his fingers gently brushing against hers. "I don't know," he said, his tone light and hopeful. "But as long as we're together, I'm ready for anything." Zyra smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never felt so at home, so complete. She had found a place in this world, a purpose, and the love of a man who had shown her a different way of life. They sat there for a while, silently watching the stars. The world around them was quiet, peaceful. The chaos of the past, the battles, the warships, the Galactic Empire, felt so distant now, like a dream she had left behind. She had found a new home, a new family, and a love that was stronger than anything she had ever known. As the night stretched on, Zyra felt a sense of calm wash over her. The future was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer alone. She had Alex by her side, and together they would face whatever came next. Hand in hand, they would build a life filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. And as they sat there, gazing at the stars, Zyra knew that the journey she had started on Earth was only just beginning. With Alex by her side, there was nothing she couldn't face. Together, they would write their own story, a story of love, of redemption, and of a future where humans and aliens could live in harmony. The stars above them twinkled, as if to say, "The best is yet to come."